think that was the start of my transformation as an individual, and yeah, it was the beginning of my transformation, and it was one of, I think, two steps of transformation as me as a leader and a manager.
So let's get into that first one. So what was the insight that you were gaining that led to that transformation, and then we'll go on to the second stage.
Well, I think I've already said it was just a totally different culture.
But you had to act on it still, so you're learning that. But what was it that then said, well, actually, I want to transform so I can be how I want to be? Not very easy for everybody. That you still need
Yeah.
to change the way you are.
Well, I don't think I made a conscious transformation at that
Mm,
point because I still got the GEC blood running in my veins, and
yeah.
I needed a blood transplant pretty bloody quickly.
Hello, and welcome to Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. In each episode of the show, we hear the insightful confessions of a successful leader who wants to inspire others to live their professional and personal dreams. I am always keen to hear your feedback, particularly in relation to the kinds of leaders you would like me to invite onto the show in future. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the rich insights from our special guest.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. I'm delighted that Jeremy Fish has joined me in the studio today. Jeremy, welcome.
Welcome, Andrew. Well, thank you. It's lovely to be here. It's great.
Good to see you, and we're looking forward to getting to know you today. We always start by asking the first question of our guest around who you are. Tell us a bit about yourself and where your current focus is.
Well, I'm Jeremy Fish. I am CEO of Ardent Hire Solutions. We are a private equity-backed rental provider of telehandlers, which are things that sort of lift pallets and other things and bricks and so forth. Roto telehandlers, which are sort of bigger machines, and smart fuel tanks. So we're a national-based company. We employ about 180 people, and we'll have revenues of sort of between 60 and 70 million this year.
Super.
I've been in position for 7 years now, coming up to my 8th year. I've got a family. I'm married. I've got two children. When I'm not working, and that's actually, I'm trying to think when I'm not working, but anyway, when I'm not working, I actually do quite a lot of charity work, and I really enjoy that. It keeps me humble, and I do enjoy being in the outdoors. So I love hiking, fishing, gardening, anything that gets me outside and active to take my mind off work.
Brilliant. And we could transport you anywhere now in the world to go for a hike for a couple of hours, assuming it was daylight, where would you go?
Oh, do you know what? I would go to Yosemite. I would do the John Muir Trail. I did it for my honeymoon with my wife. It's about 190 miles through the John Muir Wilderness, and it is picture postcard scenery every step of the way. It's a grueling hike, but it's absolutely amazing. I would love to go.
I would love to go. I've not been yet, so that's one to put in my to-do list. Well, thank you for that. Let's go back to your early years. Now, it's really interesting when we speak to our guests because some people can actually remember when they were 3 or 4 in their family environment. A lot of leaders, CEOs, just shut out their childhood completely because they can't remember it, for whatever reason. So everyone's different. Take us back to when you were in your early years and what you remember and how that background shaped your early leadership.
Well, how early do you want to go?
Oh, as far back as you can remember, in terms of what it meant for you to become the leader that you were, particularly in your 20s.
There's a lot to that, I suppose. I think what was helpful from a very early stage was having a father who had a very strong work ethic. And he was a grafter. Well, he's still alive, and actually still is a grafter. He's a very keen sportsman. He was actually a chartered accountant. Don't hold that against me. I'm not a chartered accountant, but he's a chartered accountant, and he was a grafter. And he was a grafter in work and out of work, and I think that rubbed off on me. And he always used to tell the story that he wasn't very bright. That he failed all his O-levels because he wanted to do sports and cricket, and he wanted to be an RAF pilot. And it was a bit of a shock when he failed all his O-levels, and so he did them all again and passed them, and then he went on to become an accountant. And he passed all his accountancy exams, and my daughter's doing them at the moment, saying, God, I couldn't do them. I think that's so damn hard, in a firm called Chalmers Impey, that then went through several rounds of mergers to become, a big company called Kidson's Impey that actually got swallowed up by Baker Tilly eventually. So this work ethic absolutely rubbed off on me, and I wasn't particularly bright at school either. Now, actually, I got quite good results at school, but I had to graft. When I was a kid, I used to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to study between 4 and 8, and I really did graft, and I found it really hard. But I think I was absolutely determined to get, a half decent set of grades at school. And so I think that really shaped me. And then I suppose the thing that really did change me was seeing my mother saw an advert in the Birmingham Evening Mail, and it was for a youth expedition called Operation Rally, and a chap called Colonel John Blashford Snell and Prince Charles had set up this expedition. And they were looking for young people willing to put themselves through some grueling selection weekend to go on an expedition. So I applied, and to my surprise, I got invited to a selection weekend up in Dunkeld. And I suppose I'd have been about, what age would I have been? It was 1987 this was. So I can't even work out. So I'd have just been sort of 21, 22, 23. I went to it was up in Dunkeld. And my God, they put you through the paces. You were crawling blindfolded through a bed of stinging nettles, and they were waiting you to drop out. Or, you carried a tent on your back, and you're expecting to camp at some point, and you never did. They just took you all throughout the night. Or you had to put your hand in an aquarium, and they said there was a scorpion in it. Don't get bitten. Of course, there never was. You wouldn't get away with it these days. No. And of course, half the group drop out, and there are all these people taking notes about you. And to my surprise, they offered me a position. And then they told me how much it was going to cost to go. And of course, I didn't have any money at all. So I had to go and raise all this money to go on expedition. And I did it by writing to local Rotary clubs, companies. I did sponsored walks. I did everything, and I raised the money. And I went to Indonesia on this wonderful island which is called Seram. It's about 100 miles west of Irian Java, and it was a big scientific expedition of 100 people. And it was important because there's an imaginary line that divides Southeast Asia and Australasia called the Wallace Line. And the purpose of the expedition was to visit this island where the Wallace Line ran through the middle of it to understand how the flora and fauna varied on either side of the line. So we were there to sort of collect beetles and insects and hike up the tree canopies, and it was fantastic. It really was, and it was very, very remote. So I was there for 3 months, and the bug had bitten me, not the actual literal bug, but the sort of rally bug had bitten me. And I then went back the following year to Guyana, but this time as a project leader. And it was then I realised perhaps rally wasn't as organised as I thought it was. And actually, I had to make it happen. I was part of the organisation, and we were driving down from Georgetown, which is the capital of Guyana, into about 200 miles into the jungle to a place called Kurupakari, and I was with one of the leaders, and we were in a Land Rover, and we came across this river that was going across this bridge. And I remember saying to him at the time, "Don't drive across that bridge, because I think there's trouble ahead." Anyway, the guy I was with is one of these military, just get on with it. So we drove across the bridge, and the Land Rover came off the bridge, ended in the river, and it took a team of us and a local tribe about a day to get it back on the road. Anyway, so the project that I had to do then was to build a new bridge. So I took all these young people into the jungle, and I had to procure the resources. Actually, they gave me a chainsaw as well. Wow. You wouldn't get away with this. I'd never used a chainsaw. I had no PPE. And I said to them, I've used a chainsaw. I said, well, just don't chop your leg off, fish. So we found a tree. And the plan was we were going to cut this tree down and float it down river, and then use ropes to sort of bring it up, and do the same with another tree, and then plank it across so we could actually provide a crossing to the river. And I was the only one that could use the chainsaw, so that's what they said. And the other venturers were all sort of mucking in. I'd never used a chainsaw. I cut this tree to start with, and of course I got it wrong. And the tree then came backwards and just leant on the chainsaw blade. And it literally took a whole day to chisel this thing out. Anyway, we proceeded after that, and I proceeded to cut, and this tree all of a sudden went splash straight into the river, and it sank. And the reason, unbeknown to me, was that it was a bit of hardwood called greenheart that's endemic to Guyana, and it's fireproof and the densest wood in the world. So that caused a bit of amusement several years later, but clearly not at the time. We did manage to get the tree downstream. We hauled it up with ropes, and where there's a will's a way, and we built the bridge. But it's those sorts of experiences that I still remember, even though it was, a long, long time ago, as vividly today as the day they happened. And they had, a fundamental effect on me as a young individual. And actually the whole rally experience did, because I came back from rally, and the sponsors that had supported me, I went, I looked after them. I told them what I'd done with their money and how I'd changed as a young man and as an individual. And I gave a presentation to a local Rotary Club one lunchtime. Back in those days, we used to use slides. We didn't have PowerPoint or anything. I had all these Kodak slides. And at the end of it, some chap came up to me and said, I need someone with your outlook on the world and the experiences you had. Do you want to come and work for us? And that was my first job. And that was part of the General Electric company, which is GEC, former GEC, unfortunately. And it was a company called Avery Burkle that manufacturers of weighing scales. So, I think those are the things that really did influence my early years. And then I got into the world of work. And actually, as I got into the world of work, I did realize the experiences I'd had in Indonesia and Ghana were really quite special. And they were parts of the world that I was unlikely really to go and see ever again. And I suppose as that realization grew, those experiences became more and more important to me. And I drew upon them and reflected on them more. And that sort of helped me along the way. So, so I was in GC Avery, and actually I learned more about management. This is my sort of baptism into management. I did have a degree by this time from a university up in Scotland. I did a business studies degree because I didn't really know what else to do, to be honest with you. And I couldn't do an academic degree, really, because I didn't think I was intelligent enough. And I chose this university. It was called Stirling because at the time it was a sunny day. And I thought the walking would be good. The fishing looked good. There was a lake there for sailing. And I thought, I can put up with this for a few years. So I did have a degree, but actually I knew nothing about business coming out of university, nothing at all. So GEC was my sort of baptism into the management world. And looking back on it all those years ago, everything I learned about how not to manage, I learned at GEC. And I don't want to sort of criticize GEC. It was just a part of my life and a part of my experience. I was there for 8 years in this company, and I guess that's probably one of the reasons why ultimately GEC failed. But the culture there was a very sort of macho culture. Don't forget, in those days we were just about coming into. We did have computers, but we were using SuperCalc and WordPerfect. We didn't have email. There was still a typing pool where people sort of wrote memos out, and it went into the typing pool and came back on your desk, and then you gave it to the person in the office next door. It was that sort of culture. But it was also a culture of bullying, and where good managers were considered those that shouted and bullied others into getting things done. And it was a tough environment. And when I went into it, I absolutely hated it. And I used to come back at night stressed out, wishing that, is this the rest of my life going to be like this? And as time grew and I got into the 8 years, I became part of the culture myself, and I was a bully. And, I reflect on those things, and I suppose some of them I'm thoroughly ashamed of. And looking back on it, it actually helped create some very strong principles with me that I had later in life that have actually created a red line over which I will never, ever cross again. And, today I have absolutely zero tolerance, and I mean zero tolerance of any form of bullying whatsoever. And for me, having the common courtesies and respect of each of us is absolutely right at the very top of my agenda. We're all human beings at the end of the day. We just have different responsibilities in organisations. That doesn't mean, because of our positions, that others deserve to be treated with any less dignity or respect. And I learned that the hard way by being, on the wrong end of that delivery. And it's something actually I look back on. I'm not comfortable with it, if I'm being honest, Andrew.
And thank you for sharing that. And you've given us a really good sense of those early years. So a supportive family, role model with your father, hard work ethic, because this sort of trend of actually we've got to work hard because I might not be the brightest and understand all of that. And yet this great opportunity with Rally that you talked about. I'm really interested in people really relate to this because they'll be in similar cultures to the one you describe about the bullying culture. And yes, we do become part of it. What was it for you that led to you actually getting out of that particular environment at the point you did after 8 years?
Yeah, well, I didn't know anything different. And that's the problem when you're part of it. You think it's normal behaviour. And it's not until you leave an organisation and you go into another organisation that you realise actually just how truly dreadful it is. And the next organisation I worked for was a company called Mysis, and it was listed, set up by a chap called Kevin Lomax, a very, very successful entrepreneur. And while I was at GEC, I was working for a chap called Rupert Soames, who joined as a young protege of Lord Weinstock to come and sort the company out. And I was responsible for delivering sort of several improvement projects, a lot of which were technology based. And he left as Avery Burker was sold by GEC, and he went to join Mises, their banking division, Midas Capti. And he phoned me up and said, "Fish, I want you to come and work for me." And I said, yes, Rupert. And I had to go and live down in Wimbledon, so I used to commute down there and stay down there during the week. And it was a very different culture because this was full of software engineers, consultants, risk consultants, and basically, if you said boo to them, they would just down tools and go and get a job down the road for 30, 40 grand more. So no one said boo to anybody. And all of a sudden, it was a very respectful, polite, courteous, professional, a really good professional culture. It was no less challenging. It was no less demanding. It was no less requiring. But it got things done by treating people as people. And those people were treated as people in many cases because they were experts in what they do, which is a dreadful thing about manufacturing compared with some of the other professions. And it was a huge culture shock to me, and it was a massive culture shock. And actually, it was so refreshing. I found it energizing, and all of a sudden, I felt myself flourishing and shining more. I then did an MBA, as part of that. I did it part time. Did a distance learning MBA, over 4 years. So I was working all hours that God could send, and my wife had two children during that time, and I was away down in Wimbledon, and then at weekends studying for an MBA, loving every second of it, but actually putting quite a lot of pressure on my wife, who was very, very accommodating. Although it put some pressure on our marriage. I think it would on any marriage. But for me, professionally, it was wonderful. I think that was the start of my transformation as an individual. And yeah, it was the beginning of my transformation. And it was one of, I think, 2 steps of transformation as me as a leader and a manager.
So let's get into that first one. So what was the insight that you were gaining that led to that transformation? And then we'll go on to the second stage.
Well, I think I've already said it was just a totally different culture.
But you had to act on it still. So you're learning that. But what was it then that said, well, actually, I want to transform so I can be how I want to be? Not very easy for everybody, that. You still need to change the way you are.
Well, I don't think I made a conscious transformation at that point, because I still got the GEC blood running in my veins, and I needed a blood transplant pretty bloody quickly. But you learn just from a survival instinct to start with that you don't treat people like you treated them at GEC, because otherwise you'll have no one working for you, and that's not good in a leadership position, because then you tend to be out of a job fairly quickly. So I think the step 1 was the survival instinct, and then step two was when. So I got what happened then. I got promoted. So I came in as the head of the IT department for Midas Capti, the division. To be honest with you, I knew nothing about IT, nothing. And I remember Rupert saying, "Oh, Fish, you'll pick it up as you go along." And I was thinking, well, it's taking a bit of a risk on me. But actually, it was about my ability to get things done rather than my knowledge of IT. And actually, I did decide at that point, I've got no credibility with any IT people because I know nothing about IT. So I did all the British Computer Society exams, about 7 of them. I won the Worldwide Winner Award for the highest marks in the exams a long time ago, and I was awarded the Proms G Prize, which is a project management prize for the best marks in the project management exam. And I suppose that reflects my obsession with sort of working hard, because I'm coming back to the fact I don't consider myself to be a particularly intelligent or bright person. I consider myself to be focused and a grafter. And I think I only got those results, as I did the MBA, through just hard work, graft, and putting the hours in. So I got promoted to the IT director at that point of the financial services division. And similarly then, I said to the guys there, I know nothing about financial services. So actually, I then did all the financial services exams. So I did FP1, FP2, and FP3. So I could then talk. And again, this is sort of putting even more pressure on my marriage.
Yeah.
So I could actually talk to them in terms of the life products on offer and IT. I did that, and then I left Mises for a while. Mises, the financial services division, and actually I made a mistake by joining an SME. as the managing director, only 5 million turnover. And I thought, this is great. And actually, I found a different side to private company culture, because I had a lovely bonus package in place where I got to get 10% of the profits over a certain level. And what I used to find, just as I was getting to the threshold, I used to get an invoice from the owner of the company charging his £20,000 helicopter flight to the P&L, which always just kept me under the threshold. And I said to him one day, I said, why don't you just catch first-class train to London instead of having to take a helicopter? Because actually it'll save us some money. And he said to, and I remember this, he said to me, it's my company, I'll do what I want, and if you don't like it, you can leave. So I left. And that always taught me something then, actually, that I'd always worked for public companies, and this sort of environment of meritocracy and all those sorts of things doesn't apply actually everywhere. And that's, a lesson for me and I suppose I was naive still at that age. But then I had another call from Rupert Soames, and he said, Fish, he said, I've left Mises and I'm now chief executive of a Greco PLC. And nobody knew what a Greco was. In fact, we always used to call it Agrico, which for the first 3 months. And he said, Fish, I want you to come up to Glasgow and run a project turnaround program. And I said, well, actually, Rupert, I've just started at this software company and I'm happy. You don't really want to do that. Thank you. But, he said, right. So I want you to go out to Houston and join the North American board and run a project turnaround there. And I looked at myself and I thought, well, actually, wouldn't it be great to actually go and live, work abroad, take my family out there, experience American culture? So we did. And the hardest part of that was actually making the decision. And I would say that stint in North America had probably the biggest transformational effect on me as a leader and a manager, because the business was in a turnaround situation. The president, a chap called George Walker, who I have the greatest of respect for and highest of regard, had come through a similar journey where in a previous life he's an accountant, he was a bully, and he'd had this sort of this moment where he'd realised it was not the right approach. And he totally transformed his management style. And it was a management style of complete openness, complete transparency. And just as at GEC, where I used to sort of hang my personality up on the door as I came to work and then become a person again where I left work, in North America at this company, it was blurred. They wanted your they didn't want you only to work, they wanted your personality, they wanted your emotions, they wanted your commitment. They wanted you to reveal yourself. Effectively, it was like standing naked in front of your peers. And at first, it was quite uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable getting feedback, which, your instinct was to sort of reject it or feel battered or bruised. But as you realise then, actually, your colleagues wanted the best for you. It was a fantastic journey. And at the same time, we had a management library where we were studying all these self-development books and actually, trying to extract the threads for those and how we could improve ourselves as a management team. And it was a sort of collective movement. That's 20 years ago. Most of that management team today. And, and I'm still in touch with George. And, we look back on George will say it was the best management team I ever had. And it was a fantastic part of my life. And I'm in exactly the same place. And the business just took off. The profits trebled. The turnover went through the roof. We had an absolute blast. And for the next 3 years, I was just firing on all cylinders, not only in terms of my own personal growth and development, but living in a new culture, working with Americans and the North Americans, making friends. It was just absolutely fantastic. And, it was just wonderful.
And what happened next in terms of, again, focusing on as you've been doing this sort of leadership journey that you've been on in terms of the next sort of 5 or 10 years that you were becoming more mature and learning from the strengths that you gained from that and grit and determination and graft, but also recognizing sometimes that sacrifice have to be made with that?
Well, I came back to the UK at that point, still with the Greco, and ran part of the UK business for a while. And actually, the management style was very different, and it was more closed. It was more traditional, and I didn't like that. But my own management style at that point had changed, and it had changed forever. And I'd reached a tipping point. And actually, I found that I got a lot more traction with the way I interacted with people and teams, and the way I got commitment from people. And it was enjoyable. And then they asked me to go and set up a Greco in Russia. And so I was sort of back on the commuting. I didn't go and live in Russia, but I went out first thing on the Monday and came back on a Friday with visits to mid-Russia and East Russia, sort of also requiring me to be out there for a weekend. And that was another experience. I mean, God, it was amazing. I mean, it was just like the Wild East. it's really difficult to describe, really. It was hairy, it was invigorating, it was stressful, it was unpredictable, it was fast moving, and actually the business out there just took off. Actually, Agreco in Russia became Agreco's largest depot-based business. And it went from like 300,000 when I took it on to 75 million in like just a few years. And it was phenomenal. And then I got promoted after that to take on all the emerging markets. So I took on territories in Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Romania, Greece, the Middle East, and I was overseeing large power projects as well, Turkey. So I was sort of managing people across all these different cultures. And again, I found that very exciting, very stimulating. I couldn't quite apply the same level of transparency and openness as I could in North America, because especially with Russians and some and Turkey as well. But it gave me a sort of, gave me more breadth to my management style. But at the same time, that role was doing me in, because in the Middle East and Saudi Arabia, they have weekends on a Thursday and a Friday, and a Friday and a Saturday, and Russia has a normal week. So I found myself working 7 days a week. And actually, I didn't take my family out to the Middle East. So I used to come back once a month for board meetings. So actually, that was quite a difficult time. That pushed me probably to my absolute limit. That pushed me to my breaking point. And I didn't break, but I knew that I was close to it. And even though I found the work completely absorbing and unbelievably exciting, there was a large piece of my life missing, and that was my family. So it was a little bit dark for me, that period. And I learned from that actually I can't be a good leader and an effective leader and manager without my family. And all the monotony of family life compared with jet setting around the world, doing deals with East Europeans and everything. Actually, you need something to balance you. And my family life, that was missing. So that was a really tough lesson. And I did that for 2 years. And I wouldn't want to go back there again.
How did you know that you were very close to it? And how did you know at that point that you needed to move away from it?
It was just the way I felt in myself, I think, and the way I was approaching each day. I'm pretty much a half full, person, sort of half empty. But increasingly, I was starting to see life as a little bit half empty, and questioning myself, my sanity, my everything about me, and what was I doing it for? And actually, it resolved itself. And actually, I thank Rupert for this, because we had a meeting in the UK, and he said, "Are you going to move out permanently to Dubai?" And I said, "No, I'm not." And so I think that was a trigger for them to think about how they reorganised the business. And so they actually carved up my region, and effectively I was made redundant. But before I departed, they said, "Oh, Jeremy, I want you to come back and run Russia and the large CIS business. You can run it from the UK with your family." And actually, I said at that point, "No, thanks very much," because I've done Russia. And actually, looking back at it, I'm so glad I said that, because it wouldn't have been a happy ending otherwise, would it? So I came out of that business, and literally the day I came out of that business, I think I landed back in the UK on Saturday, the 5th of April or something like that, to help me with my tax. I started as a consultant with Ainsco on the Monday. And I was with them for a whole year, running a business turnaround project that latterly helped sell the business to another private equity company. And then I was recruited then into Nationwide Platforms as the managing director. So it worked out fine in the end, but it did help me appreciate where my breaking point was, and I hadn't really been pushed emotionally to my breaking point before, and I think that helped me as well, give me a better understanding of myself as a manager and a leader. And then at Nationwide Platforms, it was actually my management style worked great there. It was everything I'd learned, it just everything seemed to fall into place at that point, and I very much enjoyed the experience. I got on very well with the group chief executive. So I ran Nationwide Platforms. It had about 1,000 people, turnover 120 million. It was and still is the largest powered access company in the UK. And I had a fantastic relationship with the group chief executive, Don Kenny, who I had a lot of respect for, and he had a lot of respect for me as well. And even though he was sort of feared by others in the organisation, I never really knew why. But my strategy, my approach was always to go to him with a problem that I identified before he noticed it and reported it to me, and also to go along with the solution. And actually, every time he say, "Yeah, just carry on. That's exactly what we need to do." So actually, I had a really good tenure at Nationwide Platforms. I had quite a large management team, 14 people reporting to me. We had a lot of fun. It was great. I loved it. Loved every second of it. And then Lavenden was being sold to Loxham, and just before it got sold, I was asked by a headhunting company if I'd like to go and be chief executive of Ardent Hire. And I was slightly concerned about being sold to Loxham, to be honest with you, being part of a larger group. So I looked at it, and I decided it was a basket case at the time, and I mean a real basket case. And I thought, great, I really love that. And I left. This is a really important principle to me as well. I went and spoke with Don and gave him my notice period. And I said to him, look, I think this is September, so would you mind if I left, in the new year? He said, well, actually, Jeremy, we need to recruit your replacement, and I expect you to honour your full notice period. So I said, yes, I'll do that. Of course I will. And of course I worked, as I normally work during my notice period. And one of my really key important principles is you tell the quality of a person by how they behave in their notice period. And that's something I've applied certainly through most of my career. So I wasn't, so I was absolutely, even though my heart was moving somewhere else, I was absolutely adamant that I was going to provide, the service for which I was being paid. Anyway, Arden started putting a bit of pressure on me and saying, oh, we need you earlier. Would you consider working for us for 2 days a week? So I went back to Lavin and said, would you mind if I split my time? And they said, yes. And I stayed in place. I did that. And at the end of February, which is when I came out of the business, unbeknown to me that the business had been sold to Loxham. And I left on my last day was the day it had sold. And look, Lavender came back to me and said, look, thank you for everything you've done. You've got a whole load of LTIPs and bonuses. We're going to pay those in full. And that was unbeknown to me, but what it says is to me, and that was a moment of decency in my life that a company could have easily said, oh, well, he's off, don't pay him anything. But I'd like to think that I behaved as I would expect to behave, as if it was just any other day. And I think, Lavender, did similar. And that's an important principle to me, to treat people as you want to be treated yourself. And in fact, Andrew, I've got 5 principles in life that I've had for 30 years and I've never changed, and maybe we'll talk about those a bit later. But then I went to Ardent, where I've been for the last nearly 8 years now.
Yeah. Super. Well, we're coming towards the end of our time together, Jeremy, because it's been a lovely journey. But I've got 2 things. I want to hear the principles, because I think that's important. I think listeners would want to hear those. And I've got a final question that I want to put to you, which is quite a deep question, really, but I want to understand your response to it. So if that's okay, we'll do that.
Okay. So the 5 principles I have that haven't really changed at all, even though the world's changed sort of hugely around me. Common sense prevails. That's rule number 1. That's what business is. It's use your common sense. So many people overcomplicate things with jargon and buzzwords, and just forget all that. Business is about somebody wanting to buy something from someone who wants to sell it, and some meeting of minds in the middle. Second principle is measure what you do. If you're not measuring, you're only practicing. If you're not measuring, you don't know where you are or how you're performing. The third one, I've got to make sure I can remember them now. The third one is treat people as you expect to be treated yourself. No, it doesn't matter whether you're the toilet cleaner, the chief executive. There are no ifs and buts on that. That's how it needs to be. At some point, I'm sure my career will be on the way down, and I hope people would treat me the same as when my career's on the way up. The fourth one is say what you do and do what you say. As a professional, as a leader, if I tell you I'm going to do something, I'll do it. And if there's an occasion where I can't, I will tell you I can't and what I'm going to do about it. So if I say I'm going to get you the report by Thursday, I'll try and get it to you by Wednesday. If I say I'm going to deliver, a certain amount of profit, I'll do my damnedest. Well, I will deliver the profit. And the last one, which is probably perhaps the weakest of them all, maybe, is under-promise what you deliver and over-deliver what you promise. And that's probably one of the more difficult ones to do. Sometimes you have things that are beyond your control. But those are the 5 principles, and I don't really see any need to change them, actually. Even though the world is changing around us, digitization, internet, AI, everything, I haven't found a reason yet to change them.
And you might not be able to remember, but what age do you think you introduced these principles? Probably already been part of you, but when did you actually crystallize those as so important to you in your life? What age were you, do you think?
I'd say it's probably, it's difficult to answer that question. They've sort of grown up with me over the years, maybe in my 30s.
That makes sense. That maturity comes through. So I've got one question to leave with, Jeremy, which I'm not sure how to phrase this, so I'm just going to say it and then see what comes up. So And you've said it a few times in this podcast. So if you could go back, and it's a time machine, to the childhood version of you, and put an arm around them and say, look, I'm your older version, look at me. I've been successful, I've done this, I've done that. And actually the message that you're going to give them is, you are bright enough. How would that have changed your life, if any, if you'd had that advice from this loving, caring person that's come to tell you that and reassure you that actually you're already bright enough to be able to do the things you need to do in life?
I don't think it would have changed me at all, if I'm being honest with you. Actually, the implication there is that my father didn't put his arm around me. And he did. He was a fantastic father in his own way. I don't think, because it comes down to self-confidence at the end of the day. And ultimately, life is a competition, isn't it? I mean, you're competing against other people, and you're competing for orders, for jobs, for everything. So it's about how you see yourself and your own level of how you perceive yourself in the world. And so I don't think it would have been any different, to be honest with you. You've got to come to that realization yourself about your own capability. I don't think it'd be any different, Andrew. But I think what it does, to take it, just build on your point, I think the need for coaching young people in their 20s and their 30s is so valuable. And I did have the benefit of some coaching, took off my own back. In fact, I do mentoring now, actually. I do mentoring for the Chartered Institute of Marketing. And I've done quite a lot of these over the years, and it's something I do voluntarily to help people that are at a career crossroads. And I know this is what you do, and I can't recommend that enough for young aspiring leaders that are soul searching for that next step, are soul searching for the things they need to do to reach their full potential, and are soul searching really to get that next job on the corporate ladder.
I love that. That's a great place to finish, Jeremy. I really appreciate you being here today and spending time with us. I love listening to the journey that you've been in, that eclectic experience, which all started with that rally experience earlier in your life. So I just want to say once again, thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you very much, Andrew. It's been a pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader. You can access all previous episodes of the show at confessionsofaSuccessfulLeader.com. If you are interested in finding out more about conscious leadership and self-coaching, just type in Andrew Tallents into LinkedIn or your favorite browser, and you'll find my contact details and all the content that you need. Until next time, don't forget to stay present, curious, and above all, conscious.